All right, welcome back, OGX Podcast. We're talking Pitchstock this week. We thought we'd take an opportunity just to reflect a little bit on past Pitchstock and talk about our excitement for next week and the speakers we're bringing in, the topics we're going to talk about. So I think let's chat a little bit about the evolution of Pitchstock. Let's go back to year one and what that was like.
Oh boy, maybe we should start with you, Laura, because we always joke you were literally hired. You were on the job for like a week. And we were like, by the way, we're going to do this conference. This was so long ago. Maybe it was 2019. 2019, really long time ago. Something like that definitely would not have been my idea. It was for sure Chris's idea to launch
right.
a conference that we were, leading. Did we have business leading at the time? Probably not, but I don't know. We just jumped right into it. And honestly, it ended up being excellent. Here are the things I remember about it. One, it's where we first met Trisha. She was at ASU at the time, and that was a big deal because we were like just kind of considered ourselves like off the grid, nobodies, and like how did she hear about us? This was a big time coach, a big time school. She was interested. Her coming in person like really made us feel like, okay, people are listening. So people want to know this stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that was a big deal. And obviously our relationship with her has, continued to evolve, and we've worked with, her in a variety of forms over the years, which has been really just such a privilege. But we just met a ton of people. It's really when we got originally connected to, I think, Dina Sorensen then, Kyla Holtz. We just connected to some really, really smart people. And that alone was great. It was the first time we had a tech company up there who rattled off some stuff. And everyone was just kind of firing away, basically like, that's a bunch of bull. No, that's not good enough for us. You're giving us a hand-me-down product. And it was like this really inspiring, like, no, this is an educated audience, and in hindsight, we certainly knew a lot less then than we do now, but we knew a lot. And everyone in that room knew something and knew enough to know that, like, no, tech companies cannot get up there and give us some like 50% product. So yeah, I remember just being like, really, I don't know, just thinking to myself, like, there's a lot of smart people who are demanding more, pushing for more. And I don't fully remember, but my assumption is going into that conference, I was like, what the hell are we doing? That's because that's usually what happens. It's like a whirlwind. We're in it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are we ready for this? So I assume that's what I was thinking going into it. I'm sure that's what you were thinking because you had worked for us for like 4 days and we're like, basically. Give a talk. Yeah. But I think that was really the time where we realized, like, there's a network here. It expands nationally. There are people digging. I think that's the first time where I thought, like, we're not on this, like, island. We're connected to people. So the next year we brought it back. It was 2020, so it was COVID. So we did it virtually. So obviously it had a little bit of a different feel. But it was the same. It was this, I felt like it was the same as far as feeling like there was this network. When we asked different coaches to speak and participate, it was a lot easier for them to say yes, because they knew who we were, the types of things we were going for, what our intentions were. So I think that alone, even though it was just a weird time because it was COVID and everything was virtual, it still felt like we've grown because more people are aware of what the messages we're talking about, the content we're talking about, and know who we are. So that was great. After that, I think we took a pause, and I'm sure I drove the boat on the pause because I was like, listen, we talked about bringing it back in person. It was like, we're not event planners, right? We just really want to facilitate conversation. We really like the idea of community. We've never had the intention of like, let's make sure we sit on top and no one can reach us. Like that doesn't help anybody, So, we've always been really firm in those values. And so I get it. It's always made sense to like, then let's have an event where we bring everyone together, but it's intimidating to run an event and to sell tickets and all of this stuff. And so the reality is, I think the time we were at, what we had on our plates, it just didn't feel like we could manage it. Sometimes it's like something's a great idea. It's just not the right time. You don't have the capacity. I think so we kind of let go of it.
We were still really getting our feet under us about the college assessments and, the timing of this, in August, and then, we're going to go on the road literally 2 weeks later. I think in those, those gap years, I think COVID obviously made a lot of people nervous about still being in person, and there were still waves of it going around, and it just kind of felt like the right time to just take a step back from it, but then bring it back in 2023 in a really intentional way and formalize it more, to really bring it I think a step up in terms of the in-person experience. I think the virtual side, we've always done it really well of being able to communicate ourselves through virtual means, but the in-person experience last year was definitely a step up. Up.
I agree. I think what really changed my mind, because I think like Chris and I were always going back and forth. Like she's like, let's bring it back. And I'm like, no, we don't have the capacity. It's so much, such a huge event. It takes so much, but we went to NFCA, I guess it was 2021 or 2022, maybe 2022, I think it was. And there were a lot of pitching coaches that would come up to us, people that we knew
about it. Yeah.
And like, are you going to bring that back? Like, we just are craving when you go to NFCA, oftentimes, because it's obviously for everyone, the content stretches from one end of the spectrum to the other when it comes to, what the information coaches want and need. And it was really obvious that pitching coaches were like, we want to dive into pitching. Like, can you bring that back? And I was just thinking like, man, I felt really inspired by those conversations, and like people really want it. They're hungry. You love to see a community hungry. And so I started to ask myself like, okay, we got on this path, we got into this journey to start because we felt like pitching was starting to get like stagnant, we were getting like complacent with how we train it, what it is, what we know about it. So we've asked people to get charged, become charged about and passionate about like diving in, learning more. We've asked them to do that, and now they are, and we're like, oh, sorry. So that's kind of how I was feeling. I'm like, okay, maybe we should bring it back. Like maybe we should, host this. So last year was the first year we brought it back. We brought it back in person, and I think there was still, I think the majority of people joined virtually. It's just now that how it is, like virtual is just, it's so much more feasible for people. Logistically it works. But there's nothing that can mimic an in-person experience. And I just like, as I like face-to-face interaction. I like when people are like feeding off each other's energy. And I felt really great last year about physically being in the room with people that are willing to share. This was not a like, let me tell you this little surface base. Like, no, this is people diving in. We are not afraid to like give away secrets. We hopefully all know like it is not that simple. Someone could know exactly how you do things and still not do it like you do it. And so it was a lot of sharing. It felt like a big community. It did not feel like, you're my enemy, we're opponents. It felt really, really connected. I loved that about it. I think oftentimes what I hear from pitching coaches on consulting calls, the reason why they like consulting with us throughout the year, obviously besides the fact that we can obviously manage their data really well, we can give them information that they don't feel like they can see themselves, but they really love the discussions that we have because they're like, I need someone to go back and forth with, and you can't call someone else in your conference. You can't call your friends who are also pitching coaches. They're like, dude, every man for themselves, you know what I mean? So like, mind your business, I'm trying to win my own game. So it's like all of a sudden this connectivity in season really becomes fractured. And we're a neutral party, we're a neutral party. We're not like on one side versus the other. And so I know I've gotten a lot of feedback about people really liking that relationship, having someone, what do you think? I want to try this, but I'm afraid of this, and having someone to kind of like go back and forth with, which isn't always available on your staff because everyone's got their own responsibilities and jobs, and everyone probably at some point in the season feels like they're drowning because there's just so much, And so it's like this time, everyone's removed from season. There isn't this sense of like, we're all opponents. We're all trying to, like elbow each other and step over, one another when we're on the ground. It's very much of like, it's important we all are passionate about the same thing. So we need to share. So yeah, I'm excited for that. I think the topics are great. There's no doubt about it. But I just think what I love about Pitchstock is not just the information. It's I think I want to give us some props here because I think we're at the center of this encouragement to all to share. Yeah. You can't share too much. You really can't. You can't share too much. like we share everything we have. And this is not like someone can just be like, let us just replicate what you do. That's just not how it works. Player development is way too complicated. So it's a great culture. And I just feel like any other conference that I've attended, especially back in the day when I was like a college coach, a pitching coach, it just never quite dives deep enough. And maybe a single talk will, but for an entire day and a half, for people to be really open with one another, to feel as if like, I want to share with you because I want to bring the whole room along. I think it's really special. And I think it's kind of uncommon. I think Krista has always commented, like, when she's gone to baseball conferences like ABCA and such for hitting, it's like such a share culture. Totally. And definitely there's a divide between her experience in environments like that and then what we've ever experienced on the softball side. There's definitely a like keep your stuff to yourself culture. And I don't feel that at Pitchstock. I mean, we'll see this year. And if it feels like that, we'll keep kind of pushing. But I do think it's maybe because we are in the lead of it and we set the stage for such an openness and communication. So I think that's what I'm really looking forward to. I just think it benefits everybody. And so, yes, the content is great. This is not your average, like, we're going to be talking about like drills that you maybe would have gone to a conference 5 years ago and heard the same thing. That's not what this is about. It's really more elite level, complex topics about using data, really kind of more complex training concepts, coaches in the field that we know that are using player development in different ways. Yeah, it's great. I mean, the content's great, but the share culture, the community element, I think is what sets it apart.
I can still remember, it's not 5 years ago, as you said, I duties is assigned for, I think, like, maybe it was 4 weeks, not 4 days by the time I actually got to my first Pitchstock. But I remember, I still go back to actually that original presentation. You were like, we need to create an assessment process. Okay. And then you got to present it at Pitchstock. Okay. So getting up there and talking about that, and I go back to that, the concepts that we drafted about, what our assessment was going to start out as, and there are elements of it that exist today. Like we weren't so far off base of the way we viewed this really essential starting point of how we support pitchers, how we support coaches. And I mean, there are elements of it that are still in its original form today. Yeah. Obviously it's evolved, it's changed. We are just a big experimentation of trial and error and what sticks and what doesn't. And I still think about that, that first talk of just like, man, there were a lot of coaches, I'll say, brave enough in the room to take that information, to ponder it, to not immediately reject it, to be considered early adopters. And like, that was rare, it's rare. And as I jokingly say, a recovering academic, I've sat in a lot of academic conferences where the only people in the room are from a single discipline, right? Whether it's, athletic training, which is my background, or, maybe from a coaching lens, it's always a single, sort of like person that you're talking to. And Pitchstock's not like that. And I just think so much about you've got college coaches in the room, you've got high school coaches in the room, you've got facilities and travel ball coaches in the room. We have questions from our families of like, can parents go? Can our athletes go? Like, I love that there are multiple, I'll say the disciplines essentially, but all of the community that supports the sport are in that room. And I think that is, as I go to other conferences, more in my kind of sports medicine background, I was talking about the female athlete conference. That was what's so awesome about that conference. And I think that diversity in the room also kind of organically grows where the information kind of filters out to. The parents is going to look at it through one lens, the college coach looks at it through a different lens, and it's like, that's great. That's why there is no single secret, because the lens through which the audience hears that stuff it's really diverse. And I just think the opportunity, I think I even said at Pitchstock 2019, like, I've never been in a room where the only topic of conversation was softball pitching, and it's like, it was such an incredible moment for my own career of studying this motion for so long and being in academic conferences where it was like, the tag along to baseball, and all of a sudden you're talking to people who only want to hear about softball pitching. Talk about a dream come true, And so I think the evolution of it has been thoughtful of, who we want in that room, obviously from the diversity standpoint and the different lenses, but also the people we encourage to speak. It's not just people who are necessarily directly connected with us. It's people who are thinking forward thoughtfully differently about pitching, and as you said, implementing player development in different ways. And so for me, I've never met Paige Parker personally. I'm excited to hear her speak. She's a different voice. She's a newer voice in the coaching world, and I'm here for it. That's what I think is so important about the opportunity to be in the room and also speak and just collaborate. Is how pitching is going to move forward.
I'm reflecting on some of the pitching conferences that I went to, specifically when I was coaching in college. And, conferences in general, they're kind of they can make you feel like there's this divide. Like the people on the stage are the elite people. And when you're in the audience, you're like a little minion, you don't even want to, it's hard to even feel comfortable to raise your hand and stuff. And that's just the reality. And now I get it, because you don't want to be and now speaking is the coach that's lost every game since 1994, I get it. People want to hear how are you, but there's something about player development I don't know. It's different. It's different in the sense of we're not just getting the coaches up there that are this is the winningest coach of XYZ. There's something about Pitchstock and player development that is about I've always said, I love the underground concept. To me, we are the underground. Who the hell are we? We're the minions in most conferences, right? So at this point, obviously, yes, we have a lot of information, but started as nobodies, right? Just I'm a retired Division III pitcher, proud of that for sure, but no one that belongs on some sort of stage as far as sort of the traditional concepts of who gets a stage in a conference. But the underground is about people that you don't maybe even really know, but they've got something, right? And they've got they've got a piece that's interesting, right? And so a lot of times we will know okay, maybe that coach, he hasn't even figured it out yet totally, but she's got one piece that is really solid. She does a great job, or he does a great job of XYZ. Let's have them talk about that, because that's going to spark people's brains of how they can incorporate that. Player development is so multifaceted. It's so complicated and complex. It's not a single talk from somebody is going to teach you how to win ball games. You have to just keep picking this piece from that person, this piece from that person, and forming your own puzzle, which is why you can't share too much, So I definitely think, in addition, the reason why there's this community share culture is because, of course there are going to be some bigger names up there, because but it's not just because, hey, let's go get the top 8, pitching coaches. Let's get all the coaches that were in supers. And that's not how we go about this. It's very much about what do we know? And some of those speakers, we don't really know, but we've heard enough that we're we think their brain works a little differently. And we're really curious. Let's hear what their thoughts are. Let's see who they can, inspire. So yeah, I just think there is this real element of, that's where the share culture really comes from. It's this is not an elitist type of culture. Even the coaches, that we have that are kind of sitting in this sort of upper tier as far as success in the game, they're not like that either. They are also super willing to bring people along. I think last year after Pitchstock, we also helped with an event, the Stars of Tomorrow event with the Alliance. And we went out there and we were able to get some data for some pitchers, a camp style. And then Trisha ended up, their coaches recruiting, because it was a game style. And Trisha was out there, and the next thing she gravitated toward me and the Rapsodo. And the next thing other college coaches were circled around her. And at one point I looked up, because I was kind of running what the athletes were doing. I looked up and she had the iPad and was scrolling it, and just I'm you literally giving another talk to these 10 coaches who just want to learn from you. This was not a planned speech presentation. This was not a paid for type of thing. It was just 10 human beings, 10 coaches who want to know and we're willing to get together. And there was no like, well, I'm at this level and you're at this level. It wasn't like that. And I think it was Stacey Newman last year who said something like, because she runs pitching, obviously, and she's like, I didn't want to be a part of this like pitching culture. And when she said that, it really struck me, because I'm like, yeah, I remember kind of like growing up, being a young pitching coach, and I was not at the level where I would be in the of things like that, but it felt like what it means to be a pitching coach in the college game is the like, these are the people that sit on the stage and they're not touchable. And there's an ego there that like, I know everything. And maybe that's not true, but it definitely felt like, oh man, I can't even touch them. Almost like they're not human or something. You know, and I think, so when Stacey said that, like, I did not want to be a part of that, like, ego-driven, cliquey pitching coach. That made me laugh out loud. She had a lot of things in her talk that made me laugh out loud last year, but that made me laugh because I'm like, yeah, that is kind of how it felt, like, you don't belong. And, like, how dare you even, like, ask a question type of thing. And so, again, that might have just been what it felt like from the outside. But, yeah, I think, like, I'm really proud of us for being at the center, even though I sometimes get overwhelmed by like running an event. I'm proud of us for being at the center of it, because I do think we help facilitate that. We are not those people. We are not the elites. We do not come from backgrounds that you write it on paper and people are like, oh my God, maybe academically, maybe like as far as how much we know, what our, you know, our science backgrounds, things like that. But as far as like, none of us, you know, Krista and I played in the World Series. It was Division III. It was freaking awesome. But, you know, like none of us are coming from this, like, they were the best of the best. They learned from the best of the best. So I just have to take in everything they say. I don't know. There's just something different about, I think, us and what we will say all the time. They feel like we're approachable, and we think that's like the best comment ever, because we're like, we do really study and go after kind of complex concepts, and some, you know, look, they're pretty complicated, as you know, and rooted in a lot of science. We're like, let's talk about motor learning as if that's like no big deal, you know?
That's like a normal conversation every day.
Exactly. But for us, we're like, if we are up there just trying to like sound smarter than everyone, like, what a bust. If people can't really understand what we're talking about, if we can't break it down to a level where people are like, yeah, that makes total sense, I get it, then we failed. And I think we've always felt like that. So yeah, I think that really sits, like I said, that energy, that vibe kind of filtrates its way through the room. And I hope people feel like that. You saw yesterday, a parent wrote me and was like, would I be like a total freak if I showed up at Pitchstock? I'm like,
not at all.
Absolutely not. I did not, like, I would say like, it's 99% college coaches. You might feel out of place. Like, I would say that if that's what I felt. I'm like, absolutely not. Honestly, I don't think anyone knows who the hell anyone is. You know what I mean?
Unless you got your gear on, I don't think anybody knows, you know.
Right. And honestly, I don't even think people really did last year. It's like, it's not really about that. I don't know. It's not about that. It's not about this, like, yeah, I don't know. I just, maybe that's just the lens that I see it through. I think I'd be curious to kind of ask some of the other people in the room, like if that parent ends up coming, I kind of want to ask her, like, did you feel like you fit in? Did you feel comfortable? Did you feel like when we all just sat around on couches in the lounge in between talks that you could just ask a question to XYZ coach sitting across from you? Because I think the answer is yes. So yeah, it's kind of special. It's really special. It's a lot of work, obviously, you know, to like run something like that. Krista's obviously anchoring it. Give her so much credit for being able to pull things like this together. There's a laundry list of items that we don't even like know are happening, right? And Paul, obviously, last year, people really loved, they thought the virtual experience, I think someone said like, that was one of the best virtual experiences I've ever had. We know Paul is obviously like an absolute rock star. I mean, his craft is unbelievable. And so I know this year they're doing it even better. There's like a double mic where people ask questions virtually. Everyone in the room is going to be able to hear it. So it's even elevated from the virtual experience last year, which I think is huge. So yeah, I really hope if people are out there, obviously, if they have a chance to listen to this, it starts on Thursday and this episode is supposed to come out on Monday. I really hope that people feel inspired. Like, this isn't for just one community, as you said. It's not just for college coaches. It's not just for people who have access to tech. Yeah, it's for everyone. And I think that it's important. If you feel like you are a part of the movement, a part of the movement, the player development, the demanding more for pitching movement in any capacity, you belong here.
Yeah. I think the virtual experience last year was, it was such I know it was an endeavor to make that happen, and that, Paul and Chris's work to do that was incredible. And I think the virtual option with the in-person is just such a flexibility. And I think, like, if you are a pitcher, I don't care what level you're at, if you are a pitcher, you're the parent of a pitcher, and the episode's going to come out on Monday. So if you're just hearing this, like, virtual, if you can't make it here, just, you can get the stuff afterwards. You can have access to it. We'll have it up for purchase afterwards. But it's the in the moment conversation that I think is so important, and to be in that community. And it's for everybody. I know we've got a couple of our like summer program pitchers, college pitchers that are like, I signed up for it. I just want to listen. I'm like, I think that's appropriate. I think it's absolutely appropriate. The pitchers themselves should be in the room. These are not concepts that are talked about above them or around them. It's about them, and to have them in the conversation as well, I think it's just so powerful. And
a lot of them are already thinking ahead to their, like, maybe potential coaching careers.
Totally.
When we have college athletes come and, spend some time with us, get an assessment, do some training, their wheels are turning. Mm-hmm. Right? Their wheels are already turning. And if they think they might be, feel themselves being pulled into the coaching space, like, once you see, you can't unsee. We say that phrase all the time. It's right. Like, you can't go back once you know how much information you can have. What goes into guiding training, how we make decisions. And so they want it. They want more of it once they see, and they definitely don't want to go to a space where they're like, I'm going to go. And this is why we get, obviously, a lot of coaches that come work for us for sort of very finite periods of time, because they're like, I want to really maximize what I know about player development and then go out in the college coaching world for the first time or again. Yeah. So I think Pitchstock is a really simple way to not have to spend a year with us or 8 weeks in a summer internship. Obviously, not all the talks are coming from us, but to really try to gain that information. You mentioned this, Laura, but I think it's worth saying again that everyone in attendance, virtually or in person, gets the recording, so you could go back. That does not happen at most conferences, where you can, like, I want to re-listen to this talk because I wrote a note and I didn't really remember, or I starred something, or like, God, I loved that talk. It was, like, so inspiring. Like, go back and listen to it again, especially in those times where you're feeling like I need something to sort of, like, get my energy moving a little bit. I think getting the recordings.
Styles, people that are just like,
yes,
I want to be in the room, or I want to be able just to, listen. And then I want to go back and listen again. And I want to be able to take my notes, because I can't take my notes and listen at the same time. And I think we're so thoughtful and intentional. I'm going to pick on Riker for a second. I'm going to meet with him about his presentation to help him just, like, visuals and stuff, and kind of talk through the story. Because my teaching background, I think, has influenced the way that we ask our speakers to communicate and ask ourselves to communicate. Because if it doesn't get down to the translation level of people who will implement, then we're no better than just standing on a stage and, talking about whatever we feel like. The way things are delivered are meant and intentional in translation. It's not just like, let me talk about this in my little, like, utopia bubble of whatever. It's, let me talk about the real challenges I have that probably are the same whether you are, Division I SEC or Division III. It doesn't matter. They're the same challenges. They just maybe are at different scales. So I think like we even are, when we encourage our speakers to communicate, is like, you've got to help them translate it. You've got to be vulnerable in, what barriers did you have? What did you struggle with? That's what they want to hear, is the human side of, like, I don't have this perfect. I don't have this down, but I'm doing this. I know better, and I'm doing better.
Yep. What I'm also really looking forward to? So last year when we brought it back, it was just a single day. But this year, since it's Thursday and Friday, I assume there's going to be a lot, like, we're having a dinner that night. I assume there's going to be a lot of people just, like, sitting around the lobby.
Organic conversation.
Organic conversation. Like, that's my favorite, obviously. Like, don't tell me the topic. I wish my 2 talks, even though I'm looking forward to my 2 talks, were like, Ash, we're not going to tell you to get up there what you have to say. I'd be like, yes, because I feel more comfortable.
We're going to put you on a stool and let you talk.
Yes, and just, like, let people ask you. Yes, and I don't have to prepare a presentation, whatever. I will prepare a presentation and it will go fine. But this idea of just, like, it's not scripted. You don't already know what you're going to say. It's very just like raw and organic. That's my favorite. Obviously, it's where I feel most comfortable. It's why usually when I prepare a presentation, I have like 3 slides. Chris is always like, "Are you sure that's going to fill the time?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." Yep. But I will sort it out when I get up there. Yes. But I assume there's going to be a lot of that. So for those people who are going to be in person, I know it's a lot for those that don't live in the area and are going to be traveling, but those things you just can't replicate them. You really can't replicate, and you can't really put it like a measuring stick on like how valuable those conversations really can be. And the connections, the networking, like that's, I think, really huge. So yeah, there's a lot I'm really looking forward to. There's a lot about it that I'm really proud of, like I said. And it's not just about us. I think it's like us kind of leading the culture of it, the energy of it, and then wanting to, and then having the ability to kind of like spread that throughout. So yeah, for those who are coming for the first time, I hope they have a chance to listen to this so they can think about like, okay, that's the vibe. Yeah. So like when we say, does anybody have questions? Like, who cares who you are? Raise your hand, ask the questions. Everyone has them. Like, let's all just kind of be comfortable. Let's just be comfortable there and open and vulnerable. I think that's, like I said, that's what I felt almost like took me aback last year by how strong those things were in the room. And so I hate to go into things with expectations, but I do have an expectation that we'll pick up with that same vibe this year.
And I think that expectation is appropriate and healthy. We want to talk about all the pitching feelings, get it all on the table, right?
Yeah.
And just, I think the expectation is appropriate because that's the culture we want. And,
or conflict, you know what I mean, Laura? Like, if someone's like, that will not work in my program or in my conference, and here's why. Like, I think that stuff's great. You all know we love a healthy dose of conflict. We're just like, this is not all about everyone just being like, that sounds perfect, So I also think that's great when people are like, respectfully, of course, not like this talk was garbage or something, but like, respectfully, like, these are the challenges I face. That will not work because of XYZ. Like, when things like that come up, I think it's awesome. But you don't have things like that come up when you feel like I cannot challenge the person who's up there. I think it's important that we are not just like, if they say it, it's right. Like we don't believe that, right? It's like no one's experience is the same, and we've got to be able to go back and forth about concepts. So, I do have an expectation that I'll be like that. And I think that if we start to get the vibe that it's not like that, we're going to have to step in right away, obviously, and do that. So, I hope everyone who's listening, if you're not already signed up, as Laura mentioned, this podcast is coming out Monday. There'll still be 4 days left before Pitchstock actually, launches essentially, and you can buy virtually. You get the recordings. If you think like, I'm not available Thursday, Friday, it doesn't matter. You can still get it and go back and watch it. So I hope, we continue to just grow this community. People who are hungry, people who are willing to share, people who want to connect. And I think, the pool of people we already have, I'm excited about. The speakers I'm excited about. So hopefully we can continue to grow that pool in the next week and even beyond that.
Yep. I love it. Our next episode is going to be live at Pitchstock.
Oh, yeah.
Live at Pitchstock, yep. So next week, Thursday, our next episode, our sort of leadership team, you, me, Krista, and James. I'm so excited for James to be a part of that, and it's been fun to sort of introduce him to the social media world with his role as director of strength and conditioning, and having that podcast with him last week. So I'm excited for that. And
really smart guy.
Yeah,
really smart guy.
We'll be live at Pitchstock next week for our next episode. And if you haven't gotten your ticket yet for Pitchstock, there's still time. And if you could be in person, come on down, Weston at O'Hare.
Yep.
All right. Until next week, everyone. We'll see you later.